now the votes have been counted. They just finished over in Cook County. More ballots were counted this afternoon. Vote by mail ballots are still counting, but it's clear that we do not have enough votes to win the election, and therefore we respect the result. We respect what the voters did yesterday.
And welcome back to Politics Tonight. For just a moment, Governor Pat Quinn sounded like he was going to perhaps continue the fight regarding the election results from last night, but then he went on to concede as Illinois now prepares for a transition in its governorship. Let's explore it, and let's explore last night's election as well. Joining me here in my WGN studios, Eric Zorn, a columnist for the Chicago Tribune, and over at Tribune Tower, Chicago Tribune editorial board member Kristen McQuarrie. They are the Common Sense Caucus. They are back. Welcome to both of you. Kristen, let me start with you. Did you think it was going to be a long and dragged out battle with regard to ultimately a resolution in the governor's race, or did Pat Quinn do what you expected today?
I think he did what I expected today. I guess you could justify last night his, recognizing that people were still actually voting. There were voters in Cook County and in the city who were still casting ballots up until 2 and 3 in the morning because they did same-day registration this year, and it slowed down the whole process. So out of respect for those voters, needing to kind of collect his thoughts, he waited until today. I thought that was fine. If he had not conceded today, then we would have to start, questioning whether or not he was being a sore loser or, doing the gentlemanly thing and conceding.
Eric?
Yeah, I thought that, first of all, he really didn't make that excuse last night. Kristen's point is good that if people are still voting, maybe you don't concede. But last night, his spokesperson was out there on the floor saying, oh, there are hundreds of thousands of votes still not counted. And people were saying, well, no, that's not true. There aren't enough votes. Even if you got every last vote that isn't counted, you're not going to win this election. And so I thought it was a little churlish of him. I think that there's a lot of bad feeling in this election. It was a very negative, very expensive campaign. And I just think these two men really, really don't like each other. And maybe Governor Quinn was trying to deny Bruce Rauner a little bit of his moment last night.
It may have been, and I was saying on air I expected him to concede most likely today, and that was because I just thought he needed a good night's sleep. Maybe it was a bad night's sleep, but some time to mull over what happened, and that he's done. Now I'm just curious, Kristen, Bruce Rauner said last night he called Madigan, he called President John Cullerton, ready to work with them. How ready do you think he is to reach across the aisle with his Democratic colleagues?
I'm sure he's ready. I'm just not sure they're ready. I don't think there's really any motivation for them to, prior to Rauner being inaugurated in January, to do much to help kind of nudge the budget along. I think it'll be kind of a lame veto session. Rauner kept running on shaking up Springfield and fixing the budget, and now it's his time to deliver and to lead and to show us how to do it. So,
yes, so let me go to Eric. What do you think happens to the 2% tax? Does Pat Quinn now go in the veto session and push for that tax that he believes the state needs? Or do you think he and the other leadership step back and say, hey, the folks have a new governor, it's his problem?
Well, I talked to Senate President Cullerton last night about this very question. And, as viewers know, on January 1st, the state income tax is scheduled by law to go from 5% to 3.75%. A big hit, 25% cut in revenues coming in. Senate President Cullerton told me that absolutely not, when I asked him if the legislature was going to do anything during either the veto session
he said
or the lame
absolutely
duck
not
session.
What?
They're not going to raise any taxes. They're going to leave it to Governor-elect Rauner. They're going to wait till he's inaugurated, which is on the second Monday of January, and they're going to let him request a tax increase because he has indicated that he wants the tax to be higher than 3.75%, and Cullerton called that the Rauner tax. So that's the game that we're going to start playing right now.
Wow, and so let the games begin for sure. Now, one thing is also true, Eric, I'll start with you on this one. Madigan did not lose his supermajority last night. We had Governor Jim Edgar on our WGN coverage. He said he had word that Democrats would lose their super veto, but I didn't see it, and it hasn't happened. So does that still give Madigan the trump card?
Well, it does. I mean, having veto-proof majorities in both chambers of the General Assembly is a nice weapon to have. Now, I'm not sure how unified all these Democrats are. I mean, when you have a coalition that's that large, you're going to have a lot of people who are on the edge who can't just be voting in lockstep with the Speaker of the House every single time. So I think there is room for some negotiation, but it's a blow to Rauner and Rauner's plans to, say, enact his increase of sales taxes, one of the things that he said he wanted to do. I'm not sure that, I'm fairly certain the General Assembly is not going to go along with that.
So, Kristen, my guess, we had the vote on the referendum for minimum wage. It passed overwhelmingly, no surprise there. That's what it was supposed to. My question is, does Bruce Rauner step in now and say, here's what I think, okay, I'll give you your minimum wage, and here's what you're going to do for me in terms of business incentives?
That's possible. I actually think, though, the Democrats, before Quinn leaves office, that is one thing that I think they will do during veto session. I think kind of as a courtesy to Pat Quinn. You notice even during his concession speech, he brought up that issue, I think kind of hinting that as he exits stage left, instituting a higher minimum wage would be one way for him to kind of have a feather in his cap before he leaves. So I think that's actually something that's going to get done this fall during the lame duck session before Rauner's inaugurated.
Yeah, I agree with that. Stage left is the right way to put that. They're going to put some of those things into place, but they're not going to give him the tax increase, and they're probably not going to give him the business reforms that he wants. They're going to wait until he's governor, and they can say, you come to us. And I think they're going to make him come with his hat in his hand, because what cards does he have if he doesn't have the threat of the veto? So, I mean, I think that's a real problem for him.
I'm just curious what you think, Kristen and Eric. Bruce Rauner, of course, has kept his distance from the press throughout this entire campaign. 100% control of his message. Talked to us when he wanted to talk to us. Does that change now? He won.
I sure hope so. I mean, I hope it does. I don't particularly. I don't like the way he handled the press during the campaign. I don't think you saw many members of the press who did. I think we are a vehicle to get your message out. We are a vehicle to voters, and so I don't want to see this tightly controlled, messaged new governor that we sort of see out of City Hall with Rahm Emanuel. It doesn't really. Transparency becomes an issue. So I hope that was just a campaign strategy, and that moving forward he will try to build relationships.
But Kristen, wouldn't you agree, though, that discipline that he showed in this campaign, I mean, and I didn't like it either, I probably liked it less than you liked it, that was one of the keys to his success, that he stayed on message. He was not knocked off. He had like 4 things he's going to do. He's going to cut taxes, he's going to grow jobs, he's going to increase funding for education, he's going to balance the budget. Said that over and over again. We would ask him for details, and he would turn and say, next question. He just was not going to engage in that, and by that token, he did not make the sort of enemies that you make when you start outlining specific cuts and making, all these specific plans. I mean, like I say, I don't like it, but I think that politically it was pretty smart.
So of the other races, statewide races, no surprises there, except the treasurer's race still uncertain. Kristen, I'll come to you. Ultimately, does Mike Frerichs, who has the better financial credentials, and the Democrat pull it out, or does Tom Cross, the popular House Minority Leader formerly, does he pull it out? Where do you think this? Right now, Cross is leading in the numbers. Frerichs has not conceded.
Correct. I think, as I think I predicted earlier, that this would be a really tight race, but that Cross would have the edge. And I do think they have the math at this point. We have not heard any sort of a concession from Frerichs, which is understandable. It's very close. But Cross is up by about 22,000 votes right now, and that's going to be tough for Frerichs to overcome.
I think it's very interesting that in this state that we think of as such a blue state, you have 3 constitutional officers. We're going to have the comptroller for sure, perhaps the treasurer, and certainly the governor are going to be Republicans. So it's not, the Republican Party in Illinois is not dead, and I think that Bruce Rauner's successful campaign, throwing money around the way he did, actually helped really revive the party all across the state.
I want to move to congressional races, but first we shouldn't do that since Kristen just snuck in her correct prediction for treasurer, which we don't even know if it's true yet. I imagine, Eric, you want your victory lap.
Well, I just want to point out that although I did write a column last Friday saying why I was voting for Pat Quinn, I did predict on this program last week that Bruce Rauner was going to win, and Kristen predicted something else, as I recall.
All right, somebody owe somebody a dinner. Let's go to the congressional races. Dole beats Schneider. It's hard to call either outcome in that race a surprise. But Kristen, what is your sense? Is it the right result for the 10th district, or was there not even a wrong result to be had?
I think
and I say that, by the way, because you guys, the Tribune, said they're both the best the parties have to offer.
They really are. I mean, they're both very accomplished candidates. I think Dold is probably a little more reflective of the district because he's more moderate, and Schneider really is, he was someone who voted pretty much in lockstep with the White House. I just think it was a district that for years has been a very moderate Republican district, and that's what Dold brings to the table.
But wasn't it redrawn, Kristen? I mean, in the sense the 10th was redrawn to make it easier.
That's how Schneider won last
time. For the
time.
Democrats, yeah. Well, and so for him to lose in that district, as redrawn for a Democratic district, I thought was fairly interesting. I mean,
Eric, you're suggesting that he just didn't perform in his freshman term?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised by the result. Although I think that Kristen's right. I mean, Dold is a good candidate for that district, and it's not surprising, especially looking at the scope of history. That district has been represented by Republicans, John Porter, Mark Kirk, for many years, for the most part. So,
let me take it to the national scene with the moment we have left. Eric, Democrats took a shellacking. It happened to him 4 years ago. It happened to him now. Does President Obama figure out a way to work out with the Republican leadership, or do they just stand their ground? They both spoke today.
He really has to. I mean, it was not just the Senate that they lost, but they lost a bunch of state houses as well. I mean, this was clearly a red wave that swept over the country. There's just no way for the Democrats to spin this as anything other than really a sense of voter unhappiness with President Obama and with their party. Now, because you look at a lot of the referendums, a lot of liberal positions prevailed in these referenda across the country, but the actual electoral politics, it was not a good night for the Democrats. I mean, Al Franken won, right? I mean, what else good can you say?
Kristen, what's your thought? I mean, but that is interesting. You have these minimum wage referendum passing, so here's this blue referenda, and yet in states like Arkansas, whatever, but then it's throw the bums out, and you get the major shift towards Republicans.
Right. I really think voters are smarter sometimes than we give them credit for, and I think they recognize that having a Republican-controlled House and a Democrat-controlled Senate, they're just not getting anything done, and they just kept sending bills back and forth. I think this was sort of a referendum on Harry Reid, and the fact that they have all these bills sitting outside the Senate that they refuse to call for votes. It's a bad sign for Obama, of course. Look here. I mean, he and the First Lady came and campaigned numerous times for Governor Quinn and tried to gin up the base, and he still lost. So the star is definitely not as bright for hope and change with President Obama.
Let me wrap our segment up by getting a prediction from each of you briefly. Eric, 2 years from now, when it's time for the 2016 election, if there is gridlock in Washington, that's my hypothetical, who pays the price, Democrats or Republican, for gridlock with a Republican-controlled Congress?
Well, I don't know whether you can say it's going to be a price-paying moment, but I definitely think that it's going to be a Democrat. There are going to be Democratic gains. There almost has to be with all these Republican gains and the way the Senate map is played out. So I think it's going to be a Democratic year in 2016.
Kristen? I think it's going to be. I think the Republicans now have to carry the water. So when you ask gridlock, if there's gridlock, it's going to be the Republicans' fault. I mean, they have to actually deliver on some of the promises that they've been making. So I think it's at their feet at this point.
Depending on how many filibusters we see, of course, too.
All right. So. Remember, videotape doesn't go away. We'll revisit in 2 years. Eric Zorn, Kristen McQuarrie, as always, good to talk to the Common Sense Caucus. Thanks for your reflections. It's been a very busy week. We'll talk to you again soon.
Good to talk to you.
And we'll be back with more politics tonight in a few moments. Stay with us.